In its seemingly relentless quest for total world domination, Razer simply will not stop until every hole on your PC is stuffed with a stiff Razer dongle. It's no big secret by now that Razer has squarely taken aim at Logitech's wireless technology with their own hyper-speed wireless, which we saw debut with the Viper Ultimate, but they're back today with the Wireless Trinity, an entire wireless suite of peripherals. We've got the Blackwidow V3 Pro keyboard, we've got a wireless version of the Blackshark V2 headset that we just looked at very recently, and we finally get a wireless version of the Deathadder. So we've got the DA V2 Ultimate version here as well. We'll talk about each one individually, and then we'll talk about the experience of trying to use that entire suite together all at the same time to see if going full wireless is worth the staggering asking price of some of this new gear. You ready? Let's go! Today's video is sponsored by Lethal Gaming Gear. Based in the US, Lethal is your source for performance PC gaming needs. They offer custom paracords for a wide variety of mice that include 3D printed stress reliefs. No more heat shrink, no more flames, no more inconsistent installs. They also keep a full stock of micro switches, skates from CorePad, Tiger Arc, and Tiger Arc 2, as well as the CorePad grips for the hottest mice in gaming right now. And they now offer the top mouse pads from X-Ray Pad, like the Equate line and the Aqua Control Plus, in 2 different sizes, stocked in the US and ready to ship. Offering 1-day processing on orders and 1 to 3 day shipping anywhere in the continental US, they can get your gear in your hands fast. New custom cable drops go live every Saturday at 9 p.m. Eastern and ship out the following Monday. Need something you don't see on the site? You can always contact them and request it directly. When you're ready to elevate your game, don't get heated. Get lethal with Lethal Gaming Gear. Click the link in the description below. Yo, I'm Brian P. You're watching BadSeed Tech, and today we're checking out the new Wireless Trinity lineup from Razer. Full disclosure, they did send all these out, but you should know by now it doesn't affect my review in any way. Logitech also sent out their full wireless suite as well, so we will touch lightly on some head-to-head stuff today with a more in-depth look at the Blackwidow V3 versus the G915 coming soon, and probably a little more detailed headset comparison as well. There's just so much to cover, even without directly comparing both setups. Lastly, I want to be perfectly clear that I had zero advanced knowledge that they would be doing a Blackshark V2 wireless headset when I executed that review. I'm sure some people out there are going to feel a little burned if they've picked that up recently. So it's going to cost you big to adopt a full suite. The Blackwidow V3 comes in at $229.99 US, the Blackshark V2 Pro headset at $179.99, and the Deathadder V2 Ultimate comes in at $129.99. And the version I have here today does not include the charging dock, something I've really grown to love about my Viper Ultimate. So all in, that's just under $540 US to full send it. Starting with the Deathadder V2 Pro, unless you started playing PC games literally this morning, you should have an idea of the size and shape we're working with here. It's a big boy, right hand, ergo, real curvy. Love it or hate it, I think it's pretty safe to call the DA shape legendary at this point. In terms of shape and dimension, it's exactly what we saw in the DA V2 Wired, which was a welcome return to form after the Deathadder Elite. The weight in the move to wireless is one of the most impressive feats, as we now have a weight of roughly 88 grams on my scale. That's only an increase of about 5 to 6 grams from where the DA2 landed on my scale to go wireless. That's impressive. It's worth noting too that the wireless is available both in 2.4 gig and Bluetooth mode as well, which doesn't require the use of the dongle. And like all Razer wireless mice, you can't play a game of hide the dongle inside the body, so there's a lot of flexibility there. The other major new thing here is that while we still have the optical switches in the mouse, they have been updated to the latest iteration of the V2 Optical. The goal is to get these to feel and sound closer to a real mechanical switch without the potential drawbacks of a mechanical switch, like lifespan issues, double click stuff, and the opticals have pretty much been well received for their performance, but not so much for the click feel or the sound. These again are a big step forward. You'd still be able to tell in a blind test between these and Omron's, but they're continuing to dial these in, and I know it's a big priority for the design team to get these perfected. In comparison to the pretty stellar clicks of the Viper Mini, it's not quite there with its bigger shell, but it's awfully close. I haven't been keeping up with the available SKUs, but when we first talked about the Viper Ultimate, it was noted that charging dock would be available as a separate purchase. It's decent here at this $129.99 price point because chances are, if you're a fan of Razer mice, you've already got one of those on your desk. If not, and you want it, these are available now, but for a shockingly high price point of $49.99. I love the dock, but for that price, your best bet is to simply plug in with the SpeedFlex charging cable when you need to, and it supports play and charge as well. If you're a Deathadder fan, I'm sure I don't have to influence your purchase decision in any way here. It's probably an auto pickup for you. If you've not used a Deathadder before, it's a big mouse, and I'd really recommend buying somewhere with an easy return policy or picking up a less expensive wired version, new or used, before you commit. I am a Deathadder fan, and this is the best version of that mouse that we've seen yet. It's pricey, yes, but it's in line with what you'd expect to pay for a flagship wireless. Moving on to the headset, the very recently released Blackshark V2 reviewed very well, surprisingly well if I'm being perfectly honest, and I couldn't be happier to see a wireless version here. I really had minimal complaints when it came to the V2, outside of the fact that the mic on the lower end actually sounded better to me than the same mic running through the Synapse suite, which they have aggressively addressed here due to the inclusion of wireless. Happy to see that they've really revised the aesthetics here too to not scream Razer or gamer too loud by going with a full mono color scheme for what's a $180 headset. The pricing here beats the G Pro X wireless headset by about 20 bucks, essentially leaving you paying an $80 upcharge for wireless and some additional tweaks over the V2 at $99. That feels okay to me. We already knew the Blackshark V2 offered weight and comfort, and there's no change to that here. The headset with the mic attached is a ridiculously low 325 grams on my scale versus 372 on the G Pro X. That's a wide margin for weight. Comfort is still on point with minimal clamping force. A/B tested against the G Pro X, it is the more comfortable of the two. The only caveat here is that it's less stable. I can shake the V2 Pro off my head. I can't do that with the Logitech. One thing I did notice after using these for a little over a week, and this could be minor, but the tension on these adjustment rails doesn't feel as great as it does on the wired version, like not as strong. And I think that's because the ear cups here are heavier due to the wireless components inside, and they're likely using the same part here that they use on the wired version, tension for that lighter weight. It's just a guess, but over an extended period of use, I do find myself kind of readjusting these on my head to make them tighter. One thing I did fail to address in the Blackshark V2 video is that the isolation for being passive isolation is very good. They did a really great job with these ear cups. The frame will also accommodate some of the largest heads out there, but still adjust for small and medium heads. I have tons of room to spare in the Blackshark V2 Pro, something I'm not used to. The G Pro X I wear on its max adjustment. In terms of overall sound quality, it sounds very good for gaming and movie watching and even non-audiophile or casual music listening. I'd be willing to bet like 90% of the people watching this video, especially if you're into gaming only and not really into audiophile stuff, you're gonna be more than happy with the music playback from this headset. They use the same titanium coated 50mm drivers from the V2 wired, but they included an additional chamber for tuning. In practice, I perceive it as more of like a rich tone to the bass. There's more bass there, but it's cleaner. Like it doesn't distort the rest of the mix at all. We do see THX spatial implementation here again, and like the V2, it's actually usable in competitive settings, something I never thought I would see. It's not a must-have or make it or break it killer feature, but it's nice in that it does actually work, and it doesn't make the audio sound all weird and distant. The detachable mic here is all new as well with a 9.9mm super cardioid mic capsule. It is massive in comparison to the mic capsule that comes on the wired version of the V2. I do run this at full mic volume of 100% all the time. Otherwise, it has pretty low levels. One thing I will say is that the EQ settings in Synapse are actually very usable here, i.e. the capsule makes good use of them. Like the difference between the default and the custom setting you're hearing now is very noticeable. Overall, for a wireless mic, I'm pretty impressed here. Battery life is rated at 24 hours and 12 meters of range. In practice, neither was an issue. It performed like a beast. Not a single weird hiccup, no static, no disconnect. Nothing. So overall, it's a banger headset. The fact that they shorted Logitech's pricing by $20 at $180 here versus $200 for the Logitech is a smart move because Razer's arguably put up a better headset here than the Logitech. I will do a more detailed shootout. I want to spend some more time with these head-to-head because the only thing stopping me from emphatically recommending this over the Logitech are those tension adjustments, and I want to see if they become an issue over time. Now, this keyboard, my least favorite part of the Trinity, and bringing with it a massive $230 price point. Some of you will notice that's actually 20 under the asking price of the G915 at the time of this video, and I don't think that's an accident. We'll set aside the fact that I don't personally like a full-size keyboard on my desk. We'll set aside the fact that this copy has clicky Razer greens and not their flagship optical switches. There will be silenced yellow linears available at some point, but this one today has greens. One change is that they've now added clear housing tops to enhance the RGB experience. The keycaps here are double-shot ABS, as opposed to being spray-painted cheapo ABS caps. That's a plus. They are more durable, but they're still not PBT. The curious thing for me is that this wireless trinity was supposed to be comprised of wireless flagship peripherals, except that the Blackwidow is not Razer's flagship keyboard tier. This is Razer's version of mids, rebranded as loud. To me, what we should have got here was a Huntsman TE wireless. Now that would be a flagship wireless. Instead, what we have is a product that barely beats out the specs of the G915 by offering upgraded ABS keycaps and full-size mechanical switches versus the painted caps and low-pro switches on the G915, which I'm honestly not a fan of. All that aside, the Blackwidow V3 Pro can also run 2.4 gig and Bluetooth, which can be paired to 3 different devices and includes a USB-C cable and a leatherette wrist rest. You get dedicated media keys as well, and this digital dial that feels so-so. The dongle can be placed directly in the board as well. Stabilizers here are rough, and combined with the bottom-out sound and the green clicky switches makes for one of the, frankly, worst sounding boards I own. I'm working on a video right now to try to make sense of the expectation between people who are into custom keyboards and just your general consumer gaming keyboard market. But for me, a keyboard comes down to 4 main things. That's features, aesthetics, feel, and acoustics. And if you miss wild in any one of those categories, the whole thing is a miss. I'll be really interested to hear what the silenced linear yellows sound like, because this is not it. Lastly, the battery life here is rated at 192 hours with the lighting off, or 13 hours with 100% brightness and spectrum cycling on the RGB. There's obviously a bunch of figures in between those 2 points, but those are largely the endpoints. The only exception being that if you run the board at 100% brightness and solid white RGB for some reason, you're looking at only 5 hours of battery. For $229.99, this keyboard is a miss for me. It feels like $120 worth of keyboard with wireless added, because that's what it is. But wireless doesn't give us a better feel or better acoustics, so I just can't get behind this one. Now, the wireless experience as a whole was interesting. Firstly, the dongle for the headset is impressively larger than the other two, and the smaller dongles are labeled so you can tell them apart at a glance. I really like that. I have to take a minute to marvel that this wasn't even a thing a couple years ago. It wasn't even conceivable that we would be testing a completely wireless gaming setup. I was pretty skeptical when I tested the Logitech stuff and was largely really impressed with that whole experience, so I had pretty realistic expectations going in here. All 3 peripherals working together definitely does work, provided you take some time to set it up correctly. In my experience, the only way this works with no issues is to have the mouse dongle on the extender on the desk. The keyboard then can be in the rear I/O somewhere, and the headset can be either in the front or rear I/O. When it didn't work was having all 3 plugged into the back of my test machine, which sits on the floor. The keyboard repeatedly lost connection, mid-game, mid-match. Sometimes turning it off and back on fixed the problem, sometimes it did not. In times when the keyboard didn't totally die, it often resulted in game performance that looked and felt a lot like connection lag, but I run on hardwired fibers, so that's not it. I then tested with the keyboard and headset wireless, but the mouse wired, no issues at all. Tested again with the mouse and the headset wireless and the keyboard wired, and again, no issue. So while it may not be the keyboard specifically that causes the issue, it was always the first and only point of failure. The headset never faltered, the mouse never had any issues. So does it all work together? Yeah, but it requires specific setup, possibly a little testing and experimentation on your part, and while I definitely see the advantage of both wireless headsets and mice in the gaming space, I'm not really sold on the idea of needing a wireless keyboard, not this one in particular. I know that at some point there are plans to have Synapse support a unified dongle system so you could use each one of these dongles independently to control both devices. That may mitigate some of the issues we're experiencing here, but at the time of this video, that's not available yet. All right, final thoughts. DA V2 Ultimate. It's a flagship and it's priced as such. Lighter than I expected. Works flawlessly. Love it. So happy to finally have a wireless Deathadder, and the improvements to the switches here are great for me. Big fan of this mouse. Blackshark V2 Pro. It's good. Damn good. I never thought I would hold a Razer audio product in such high esteem. Weight, comfort, sound, mic, it's all on point. Again, the only thing that gives me a little pause is the tensioning, and we'll see how that plays out over the next couple of weeks. Blackwidow V3. No need to keep beating a dead horse here. Very obviously a miss for me. With a budget of $230, you could easily build a keyboard that was customized to you, even with Bluetooth wireless, if that was a feature that you really cared about. Lastly, Razer touts a lot about their hyperspeed wireless, about the perceived speed of that, how it looks on paper. I myself don't think I'm a talented enough player to measure the distance and timing to prove that hyperspeed wireless is 25% faster than Lightspeed wireless. I can't. They've shown us some really impressive tech demos, but what I can say is I think it's a pretty amazing achievement, number one, that we can game with wireless mice that perform just as well as wired mice, and even to the point where we can play wirelessly on an entire suite of peripherals. I will be watching this all unfold closely, and as I said, bringing you some head-to-head comparisons against some of the same kit on the Logitech side. As always, affiliate links in the description for everything we talked about today. Any questions, hit me in the comments or drop by the Discord. And that's it for this time. I'm Brian P. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button, hit that sub button, and until next time, stay up.